Welcome back. This session, we're going to talk a little bit about peer review and selecting grants in the government process. So wanted to welcome Sandra Betticioli. Hopefully I pronounced that well. Sandra, do you want to introduce yourself to the group?
Okay, so hello everybody. My name is Sandra Betticioli. I'm a senior policy officer at EMBO, which is the European Molecular Biology Organization. It's an international scientific organization aimed at promoting excellence in the life sciences. EMBO has different aims, among them the aim of funding excellent research. And that's why we are interested in peer review as a mechanism for funding scientific research. And I've been working as a policy officer in trying to improve the way we as a funding organization organize our selection processes. And that's why I've also published a couple of articles, and that's why I've been invited to participate in this conference. And I'm very happy about that.
Well, thank you so much, Sandra. Can you tell the audience a little bit about the peer review process in grant making? Sort of how does it work? What are the nuts and bolts?
Of the process in our organization?
Of peer review. When someone says this is a peer reviewed grant process, what does that really mean?
Yeah. So peer review is the basic mechanism for quality control in research. It's in its basic form, it involves a group or an individual scientific expert that judges the work of other scientific experts. Of course, funding agencies use different variations of this. To start giving some examples, for instance, the National Science Foundation in the United States uses 3 variations of this basic model. They use either ad hoc only a peer review, which means they involve individual researchers, ask them to evaluate applications, and then they base their decisions on the scores and comments given to them by these individuals. They also have a panel-only peer review, which means that they use a group of reviewers, and the decisions are based on the decisions of the whole group, and this involves the group reaching consensus on which applications would be funded. But they also use a combination of the two, so the combination of individual experts giving their comments and scores, and also then discussing in a meeting, and then rediscussing the applications and deciding which ones would be funded. So we can't really talk about one mechanism. It's actually a range of different approaches to collecting peers' expertise.
So I guess the question I have is, what are the strengths and weaknesses of peer review? Why don't we start with the strengths?
Mm-hmm. So peer review has been around for funding and for allocation of funding. It's been around for about 75 years. After it's been used extensively for allocations of research funding since after World War II, and its main strength is that it uses experts, so experts judging other experts. And it is understood, trusted, accepted by the scientific community and also by policymakers and decision makers. The research community has a leading role in this, and this ensures that the distribution of public and private funds is done according to scientific measures and not according to political aims or following political aims. It draws on a large pool of researchers because researchers are at some stage of their career are all involved in a way or another in peer review, and they actually are very willing to do it. Many of them do it actually for free, although it's a time-intense activity, because they feel that it's a responsibility, their responsibility toward the research community. And also it makes sure that exactly that the decisions are made according to the principles of the research community. And so it's the main mechanism used worldwide to allocate resources for research projects. And also the Royal Society at some point dubbed it the only effective way of properly assessing the quality of research proposals. So it's
and then I guess the counterpoint would be, what are the weaknesses? How can something like bias of the reviewers impact grant selection?
Mm-hmm. Yes, so bias has been one of the main point of criticism of peer review since the beginning of its use. And so the main question has been, can reviewers be impartial or objective when they assess their peers? And the same concerns that are present in society and on human activities are present also in the activity of peer review. And but since peer review, one of the principles of peer review is objectivity, it is very important to be able to detect bias and to do something about it. And there are different kinds of biases have been identified to interfere with peer review. And these could be conscious or unconscious biases. Conscious bias is more easy to detect. So there are conflicts of interest policies that have been put in place to deal with that. But unconscious bias is, can also sneak in. And what has been recognized, that the dangers that has been recognized is that in particular, the career stage, for example, the career stage of the applicants could influence the decisions of reviewers, or the ethnicity, or the gender of the applicant, or the research area they work in, the intellectual school of the applicants, or the affinity, the intellectual affinity with the reviewer. Also the institutional affiliation and influence in the decisions, or the fact that applicants has been already successful in receiving funding before. And so what happens is that there's a derailment of their objective judgment of scientists, and this brings to, or can bring to, a lack in diversity of research topics that are funded, or the approaches to research questions, or to the methodologies used, because reviewers tend, or they might tend to prefer applicants or subjects that follow, they're more similar to them, that follow their own research ideas or research approaches. This brings to conservatism and hindrance of innovation, and brings also to a lack of diversity in workforce.
Clarification. So I guess looking at some other approaches in the U.S., DARPA, which is the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, is known for its innovative projects and success rate. How do they select their grants, and what makes it more successful in funding innovative research ideas?
Yeah, so DARPA is a very interesting example. They actually don't use external reviewers, so they basically don't use what is the traditional peer review system. So they use what is called a strong manager method. So they have, they employ managers, which are researchers from industry or from academia, and they are people who are, there are particular people who want to push the limits of their disciplines. They are employed only for 4 to 5 years, and so they have to deliver on the projects that they want to fund in a short period of time. They are made directly responsible of the projects that they decide to start. They actually take part in the ideas and in the development of the projects, and they set milestones, and they work very closely with the funded bodies, which are scientists in industry, in academia, and other experts. And they also decide, they can decide to stop a project if they see that a project is not going well. They can decide to stop it immediately. There's a lot of flexibility. And this allows them to, they have also the freedom, and they are allowed to pick up risky projects, risky ideas. And this is how they are very, very successful. The crucial point is the selection of these program managers. And yeah, this is something that they're very good at doing. These are usually people, I was reading about it, people who are not very, they are not very focused on themselves. They really are aggressive in the way that they want to see a project succeed in a short period of time without thinking about communicating about it. They are very focused on the research, and they are out of the box thinkers. So they think about different ways of approaching research questions.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, it seems like they have both more autonomy, but then more accountability because they're going to be responsible for those that are selected. So I guess the other main funder in the U.S. is the NIH, National Institutes of Health, and they fund the majority of Lyme and tick-borne disease research in the country. NIH selects grants almost exclusively or predominantly on peer review scores, right? So it will be, they'll have whatever 14% are able to be funded, so they'll take the best 14% of those ones with the peer review score. And unfortunately, over the last 30 years, there's been very little technological innovation, no new treatments in Lyme disease, and significant concern about reviewer bias. There's even an antitrust lawsuit from patients against a major U.S. medical society where many of the peer reviewers are members, right? So how can we, like the U.S. government, NIH, the Lyme community, improve this issue so innovative grants are selected that have a real impact on patients' health?
Yeah. So different funding agencies have tried out different possible solutions to this problem. One solution is, for instance, similar to what DARPA is doing, so get rid of the traditional peer review system and have individuals directly responsible for their projects. Another way would be to increase the budgets, because the limited amount of money, of course, creates a lot of competition, so a lot of problems with peer review. And one of the causes, what this causes is that peer reviewers, when there's limited amount of funding, might want to play it safe and then just select the projects that are more likely to succeed. And so, of course, out of the box or unconventional ideas have difficulties to get through. Another way is to blind applications. So to strip the applications of any names or affiliations that could make the applications be recognizable. And this has been tried by some funders. At EMBO, we also did an experiment on that. And it's easier when the applications are very short, and so for short grants that could be done. But when the applicants have to submit a lot of information, it's really hard to anonymize applications. Or another solution would be to have schemes dedicated to innovative and out of the box ideas. So really dedicate programs to that. Some funders in Europe, for instance, the Volkswagen Foundation, had a small research grant to fund research ideas, unconventional, risky research ideas at a very initial stage. And the fact that these projects could fail or get negative results was accepted as a possible result.
Yeah, it's funny, I've sort of advocated for that idea as well, not necessarily having two tracks essentially, right? You can have the conservative track, but you want to have another track where you're actually taking a bit more risks, and you're hoping that you're going to have greater innovation there, knowing that some of them may fail, but the other ones are going to be huge successes, right? And so I think that's hopefully a viable issue. Oh, a viable option, I should say. I guess the other issue that we have, right, and I think kind of going back to that original question that we were talking about in terms of limiting that creativity and innovation, is oftentimes I hear criticism of being in this sort of catch-22, where you have an innovative idea, you're thinking about this condition in a different way. So for example, in Lyme disease, it's around persistence, right? Whether the bacteria persist in the body after treatment. We don't know that people that have long-term symptoms, whether it's a persistent infection, an autoimmune issue with dysregulation of the immune system. And oftentimes people will ask for money to say, hey, I'd like to prove this idea around persistence. But then they get a bad reviewer score because the reviewer will come back and say, well, there's no evidence that persistence happens. And then the researchers just catch me, well, I need the money to prove that it's persisting. Mm-hmm. So I can't show you evidence that it's persisting, right? So they get stuck in this idea where, or this sort of track where they can't innovate because the money isn't available, given to them until someone else innovates first.
Yeah, for instance, in that example that I just mentioned before of the Volkswagen Foundation, they ask for very short applications because they know there's not much data actually to support these ideas. They are, sometimes they're really crazy ideas. And so the application process is very, very easy, very short, it's simplified, and it's anonymized, such that the reviewers focus on the idea and not on the name or the identity, the affiliation of the applicant. As I said, the possibility of failure is accepted as a learning experience, not as a problem. And they have collected, these are short grants. I think the maximum was 18 months. So they have to show in this brief period of time that it's likely that these things, that their ideas could actually work out. And some of them have actually, they have quite a lot of examples of that. So this is one way of doing it for sure. Yeah, it's an interesting.
Well, thank you so much. I think you've given us a lot to think about in the Lyme community. And any other thoughts or anything else that you think the audience should know to find out more information about this idea, your work, and BOW in general?
Mm-hmm. Sure. I've actually published a paper that summarizes a lot of the limits that have been recognized of peer review and suggests or does a review of some of the experiments that funding agencies have done on this. So you can, of course, have a look at that article. At EMBO, we've also published an informational report, which again lists in a shorter way the main problems or limits of peer review and the experiments that have been done. Said that peer reviewed is a great mechanism and we should keep it. We're not, saying that we should not use peer review anymore. It's been working actually for 75 years. But I think, it's the responsibility of funders to realize that there are some limits of peer review. And if they want to fund the best research on research that is useful for society, they should adapt their systems to the changing structure and ecosystem of research.
Well, again, thank you so much for the time.
Thank you for having me.